On the evening of March 1st, 2019, a quiet London suburb was shaken by an act of senseless violence that would soon grip the entire nation. Jodie Chesney, a 17-year-old girl with a bright future, was spending time with her friends in a local park when she became the victim of a brutal and unprovoked attack. What should have been a peaceful night turned into a scene of horror, and in just a matter of moments, her life was taken in a way no one could have imagined. Jodie wasn't a troubled teen or involved in anything dangerous. She was a happy, caring, and ambitious young woman, known for her love of music, her deep bond with her family, and her dedication as a scout. Jodie represented everything good about youth. She had dreams, plans, and the kind of spirit that touched everyone who knew her. But in a tragic twist of fate, her life was cut short, and the question that echoed across the country was, why? News of Jodie's murder spread rapidly. It wasn't just another statistic or a line in a crime report. This was different. A teenage girl stabbed to death in a public park, with no clear motive and no warning. It felt random, it felt terrifying, and most of all, it felt unjust. Communities across the UK were stunned. Parents held their children closer, people demanded answers. Candlelight vigils were held, tributes poured in on social media, and headlines screamed with disbelief. How could something like this happen? And who would do such a thing? The search for justice began immediately. Police launched a full-scale investigation, and as details emerged, the truth became even harder to process. Jodie Chesney's death wasn't just tragic, it was avoidable, it was brutal, and it was completely senseless. The story that unfolded in the following weeks would reveal a chilling look at youth violence, gang influence, and the devastating consequences of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But beyond the facts and figures lies the story of a girl who never deserved to become a headline. Jodie was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and most of all, a human being whose life was stolen far too soon. In this video, we'll explore the heartbreaking case of Jodie Chesney, who she was, what happened that night, how the police brought her killers to justice, and what this tragedy tells us about the society we live in today. This isn't just a story of crime, it's a story of loss, of outrage, and of a family's fight for justice in the face of unthinkable grief. This is the true crime story of Jodie Chesney, and it's one the world must not forget. Jodie Chesney was more than just a name in a headline. She was a vibrant, compassionate, and bright young woman whose life was filled with promise. Born and raised in Dagenham, East London, Jodie lived with her father Peter, her stepmother, and her siblings. She shared a close bond with her family, especially her father, who often described her as the best daughter you could ask for. Their relationship was filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect, something many parents can only hope for with their teenage children. At 17, Jodie was in the final stages of her A-levels at Havering Sixth Form College, where she was studying psychology, sociology, and photography. She was a committed student with aspirations for the future, known for her intelligence, determination, and creativity. Teachers spoke highly of her curiosity and focus, and her classmates admired her for her kindness and honesty. But Jodie wasn't just academically gifted. She had a warm and infectious personality that made her well-loved by everyone around her. Friends described her as bubbly, caring, and always willing to lend a hand or offer support. She had a sharp sense of humor and a knack for making people smile. She was someone who lit up any room she walked into, not because she wanted attention, but because of the genuine energy and kindness she carried with her. Jodie was also deeply involved in her community. She was an active member of the Scouts and had achieved the prestigious role of a young Scout leader. Through this, she had developed leadership skills, compassion, and a sense of responsibility, qualities not often seen so strongly in someone her age. Her dedication to the Scouts was a reflection of her character, service-minded, mature beyond her years, and always striving to make a positive difference. Her hobbies were as wholesome as her nature. Jodie loved music and played the guitar, often using it as a way to express herself and relax. She was close with her friends, enjoyed outdoor activities, and had a passion for photography, capturing everyday moments with an artistic eye. She was also in a happy and healthy relationship with her boyfriend, Eddie Coyle, who was with her on the night of her death. Those who knew Jodie still speak of her in the present tense, a testament to the impact she had during her short life. She was someone who, despite being young, had already left her mark on the world. Her story is so painful not just because of how she died, but because of who she was. An innocent girl with a big heart and a bright future, Jodie Chesney should have had many more birthdays, more milestones, more moments. Instead, her life was stolen in an act of senseless violence. But before we talk about that terrible night, it's important to remember her not just as a victim, but as a beautiful soul who touched many lives, and who should never be forgotten. Friday, March 1st, 2019, was like any ordinary evening for Jodie Chesney. It was the start of the weekend, and she planned to spend time with friends, something she often did to unwind from the pressures of school and everyday life. That evening, Jodie and a small group of friends, including her boyfriend Eddie Coyle, decided to hang out in a park known as Amy's Park in Harold Hill, East London. It was a cold but quiet night. The group had gathered near a playground area, laughing, talking, and listening to music, a peaceful scene that gave no hint of the tragedy about to unfold. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere remained relaxed. Jodie, always sociable and easygoing, was enjoying herself just like any other teenager would on a Friday night. But that calm was shattered in an instant. At around 9:20 p.m., two males approached the group from behind a line of trees. In the dim light, they seemed to emerge almost out of nowhere. No words were exchanged, no warning given. One of the males, wearing dark clothing with his hood up, walked directly behind Jodie and, without hesitation, stabbed her once in the back. It was a single, forceful wound, but one that proved catastrophic. As quickly as they had appeared, the attackers fled, disappearing back into the darkness. At first, Jodie and her friends didn't fully understand what had happened. She stood for a moment, confused and in pain, before collapsing to the ground. Panic set in. Eddie, terrified and desperate, tried to keep her conscious while another friend called emergency services. Bystanders in nearby houses heard the commotion and rushed to help, bringing out blankets and offering support as they waited for the ambulance to arrive. Paramedics were on the scene within minutes, but the wound was severe. Despite every effort to save her, Jodie Chesney was pronounced dead just before midnight. The news hit like a shockwave, not just for her loved ones, but for the entire community. A teenage girl stabbed to death in a park, for no apparent reason. It was an unthinkable crime. The randomness and brutality of the attack made it even more horrifying. Jodie had no enemies. She wasn't involved in drugs, gangs, or violence. She was just a girl enjoying time with friends, and in a moment, her life was stolen by a faceless killer. Police quickly launched a murder investigation, cordoning off the park and collecting evidence throughout the night. Witnesses described the attackers as young males in dark clothing, but they had vanished without a trace. That night, a light went out in the lives of everyone who knew Jodie. What began as a normal evening ended in the kind of tragedy that no family should ever have to face. And as news of the stabbing spread the next morning, the entire country would soon demand to know who would do this and why. The murder of Jodie Chesney shocked the UK, and police were under immense pressure to find her killers. The Metropolitan Police immediately launched a major investigation, deploying detectives from the Homicide and Major Crime Command to work around the clock. But there was a major challenge. The attack was swift, random, and appeared to have no immediate motive. Jodie had no connection to gangs, drugs, or violence, so who would want her dead? The first key to unlocking the mystery came from witness statements. Jodie's friends described the attackers as two males dressed in dark clothing who fled the scene on foot. Though the assault had lasted only seconds, the description was enough to start building a profile. Officers canvassed the area, gathering CCTV footage from homes, businesses, and public transport in the Harold Hill area. As police reviewed hours of surveillance, they began to piece together a timeline. Cameras showed two suspects arriving in the area in a car and walking toward the park. After the attack, They were seen running away and eventually getting back into the same vehicle. Investigators tracked down the car and identified the driver through license plate recognition and phone data. This led them to Svensson Ong Akwe, a 19-year-old with known links to drug-related crime. His mobile phone data placed him near the scene at the time of the murder. Shortly after, another suspect was identified, a 17-year-old boy who couldn't be named due to legal restrictions. Both were arrested in the weeks following the murder. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Jodie had been the victim of mistaken identity in a violent drug-related feud. Ong Akwe had been involved in a dispute with a rival gang. The attackers had gone to the park expecting to confront someone else. Instead, they found Jodie and her friends, completely unrelated to their world, and launched a deadly ambush. In addition to surveillance footage and mobile phone tracking, forensic evidence also played a role. Items of clothing and weapons were recovered, and DNA analysis further tied the suspects to the scene. The 17-year-old boy who had accompanied Ong Akwe was believed to have helped plan the attack, but not deliver the fatal blow. Police arrested 4 people in total, but Ong Akwe and the 17-year-old were eventually charged with murder. During interrogations, both denied involvement, offering shifting stories and placing blame on each other. But the evidence against them was overwhelming. By the time the case went to trial later that year, the picture had become painfully clear. A senseless act of violence, driven by criminal rivalry, had taken the life of an innocent girl who had no idea what danger was approaching. The killers had shown no remorse, fleeing the scene and returning to their lives as if nothing had happened. But justice was coming, and the courtroom would soon hear the full horror of what had taken place in that dark London park. In late 2019, the trial for the murder of Jodie Chesney began at the Old Bailey in London. The courtroom was packed with media, legal teams, and members of the public who had followed the heartbreaking story for months. For Jodie's family, the trial was not just a search for justice, it was a painful journey through the details of the night their daughter's life was stolen. The prosecution presented a strong case built on surveillance footage, mobile phone tracking, forensic evidence, and witness testimony. They laid out how Svensson Ong Akwe and his 17-year-old accomplice had deliberately gone to the park that night, armed with a knife, targeting someone as part of an ongoing gang feud. But instead of striking a rival, they attacked Jodie. An innocent teenager with no connection to their world, Ong Akwe, already known to police for his involvement in drug dealing, was accused of being the one who delivered the fatal stab wound. His 17-year-old accomplice was charged with helping to plan and carry out the attack. Both defendants denied the charges, claiming they had no intention to harm anyone and tried to downplay their roles, but the evidence was overwhelming. After weeks of emotional testimony and forensic analysis, the jury found both Ong Akwe and the 17-year-old guilty of murder. In November 2019, Svensson Ong Akwe was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 26 years, while his accomplice was sentenced to a minimum of 18 years. The judge described the attack as a cowardly and shocking act of violence that had taken the life of an entirely blameless young girl. For Jodie's family, the verdict brought a sense of justice, but not peace. Her father, Peter Chesney, spoke publicly throughout the investigation and trial, expressing the unbearable pain of losing his daughter. He described the moment he received the news of her death as the worst night of my life, and called the attack every parent's worst nightmare. His grief, raw and powerful, resonated across the nation. The case sparked widespread national debate about knife crime in the UK, particularly among young people. Jodie's murder became a symbol of the rising violence plaguing British streets. Politicians, community leaders, and citizens called for stronger laws, better youth support programs, and more urgent action to stop the spread of knife violence. Vigils and marches were held in her memory, not only to honor her life, but to demand real change. Jodie Chesney's death was a tragedy that should never have happened. She was not involved in crime, not in the wrong place, just a teenager enjoying a Friday night with friends. Her story is a stark reminder of how deeply violence can reach into even the safest lives today. Jodie is remembered for her warmth, kindness, and spirit. Her name lives on through those who loved her and through the fight against youth violence. Justice may have been served, but the mission to protect other young lives is far from over.